This story is super important. This is the Rosetta Stone that explains to you what's going on inside the Democratic Party now. If you're wondering why they're not fighting back, this is going to explain it. And then at the end, we'll have a discussion about different strategies on how you can fight back. But first, oh my God, the cowardice inside Democratic institutions. So it comes from the New York Times and explains how donors are reacting and nonprofits are reacting. So here's a summary, first of all. The demoralization and fear gripping blue America in the early weeks of President Trump's administration have left liberal groups and their allies struggling for cash, hurting their ability to effectively combat the right-wing transformation of the federal government. Okay, so first we start with the donors, real quick tease on them. They say some of the country's biggest liberal donors have paused giving, frustrated with what they see as Democrats' lack of vision and worried about retaliation from a vengeful president. Okay, so now look, that second part is super disturbing. The first part is actually a little bit understandable. Let me give you details on both. But before we do that, I also want to talk to you about these different groups that are supposed to be on the left-wing side that are mainly based in Washington. And their reaction is also not good. So New York Times explains, groups that support LGBTQ rights, promote gender equity, and champion other progressive causes have cut staffing, announced that longtime leaders are leaving. Now, first of all, cutting staffing, I can understand, after an election, especially when you lose, you get less donations in, and sometimes you're forced to do what you have to do. So I'm not hating on anybody for that. But leaders leaving, I thought, that's a curious time for leaders to leave. Well, let's see why that might be happening. Well, charitable foundations that have long supported causes like voting rights, LGBTQ equality, and immigrants' rights are pulling back, devoting time to prepare for expected investigations from the Republican-led Congress. No, wait a minute. This is not time to protect yourself. This is time to protect the people that you're supposed to be protecting, immigrants, LGBTQ people, etc. So I get it, but if you're spending time preemptively defending yourself when you haven't even been asked to go to a congressional hearing and you're stopping work on important issues, this is not the time. Okay, so this is just New York Times reporting. I'm sharing what they're saying. They continue, unease extends into the offices of prominent foundations whose leaders fear being hauled into high-profile congressional hearings similar to those that damaged the reputations of top college presidents in 2023. You'll excuse me if I don't give a damn about your reputation. That's what you're worried about? No, that's terrible. If I saw that, I'd be worried about giving you a donation. You're gonna spend it to protect yourself instead of the core job. It's unacceptable, but okay. Again, I hope the New York Times is wrong about this. I don't know which groups and which leaders are doing that, but that seems like definitely the wrong path to go on. Okay, now let's get back to the Democrats in office. Well, what are they doing? Well, here we go. Alexandra Acker-Lyons, a political consultant with Silicon Valley donors that they consult, says, no one is giving until they see a plan for how we are going to better navigate this unprecedented situation and stop acting like this is a normal administration. Okay, now that's fair. Hey, you have to come up with a plan, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, etc. And don't tell me we're gonna just do business as usual. What am I giving for? Totally fair, okay? Then Robert Rabin, a Democratic consultant, says, people are mostly on the ropes or on the mat waiting for leadership, scratching our heads and giving grace to Schumer and Jeffries who are saying, pick your battles. Yes, but Chuck, Hakeem, which ones? At some point you have to say, this is a battle. For example, here on the Young Turks, we said, pick your battles. Don't worry, he's not gonna invade Canada. Focus on the money. Oh, look, there's Elon Musk at the IRS and at the Treasury getting access to information he shouldn't have. Focus there, because the robbery is gonna happen. Focus on when they won't listen to court orders. That's really important. So, minority leaders in the House and the Senate, what do you think? I don't know, but just give us money and then we'll come up with a plan later. But for now, we're picking our battles. Okay, which battles? None. That's not picking your battles. That's choosing not to fight. We'll come back to that in a minute. So if people are frustrated with that, well, we're all frustrated by that, and you're not wrong. Okay, but then when you go to some of these top advisors, consultants, etc., Dimitri Malron is an interesting guy. I've debated with him, and then I got to know him. I mean, none of these folks are bad guys. They all in their own minds think that they're doing the right thing. But here's his advice on what went wrong. Let's see if it makes sense. Late last month, Dimitri Malron, a former advisor to Reid Hoffman, who remains close to him, emailed his political list complaining that Democrats should not have committed what he called Bidencide by pressuring the former president to exit the race. So Biden should have stayed in the race. That's the genius idea we have now? Maybe we can bring him back, run in 2028. No, that's a terrible idea, an unmitigated disaster. I don't mean bringing him back. I mean the idea that Biden should have stayed in the race, and then his dementia-laden ass would have somehow miraculously won if we just did enough propaganda. Yeah, he's young and dynamic. His 28% or whatever he was down to on popularity at the end, and the country going in the right direction or wrong direction. Oh, I bet 28% wins elections, 33%, 36%. He hadn't been above 36% in approval in a long, long time. That has no chance of winning. And the genius idea that he came up with so far after the election is maybe we should have let Biden run? Okay, but that's just one consultant. So now, let's go to the big daddies. These are the actual donors. Jeff Skoll is a huge donor to the Democratic Party. He has done some wonderful things in his life. He did participant media. They did great work. And movies that you've seen, The Help, the one about Lincoln, the one about the Boston Globe, Breaking the Stories, etc. You've watched and liked those movies, and that helped to push the conversation in the right way, etc. So when I saw Skoll, I thought, wait, what's going on here? So let's find out. Jeff Skoll, a Silicon Valley billionaire and longtime friend of Elon Musk, said there was an awful lot of pressure to side with Mr. Trump. Wait, hold up, what do you mean side with Trump? I mean, it's one thing to hold back the money because clown-ass Schumer doesn't have a plan, but what do you mean side with Trump? Okay, number 10, some Democrats say a few of their reliable donors are now supporting Mr. Trump or at least looking to curry favor with him. Oh, you cowards, what are you doing? Are you running? Oh my God, they're running. Jesus Christ. Look, I don't know about Skoll in particular because of some of the nuance in the story. I'll explain in a second, but let me give you more details first on him. This month, Mr. Skoll, who has donated tens of millions to Democratic candidates and causes in recent years, but said he did not vote in the 2024 presidential election. Why didn't you vote in the presidential election? Posted a photo on social media of himself standing with Mr. Trump backstage at the inauguration. Oh boy. Because look, guys, if Skoll is going in there to say, hey, I got a beachhead here, at least he's listening to me, I can get him messages from our side, I get it, no problem, okay? But if he's talking about maybe currying favor with Trump, and then all of a sudden you're at the inauguration and you declare that you didn't even vote, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, here comes Skoll himself. Here's what he says. There are people who are absolutely against Trump, never Trumpers, who fear that they'll be retaliated against and they'll have to leave the country. Folks who wish to oppose him, it may take some time before they gather up the courage. I guess we'll all be waiting here, hoping that you guys gather up the courage at some point, as Trump has already said he's not going to listen to the courts. Okay. All right, now we go to Reid Hoffman. These are all the biggest donors to the Democratic Party. There's a greater than 50% chance that there will be repercussions from misdirection and corruption of the institutions of state to respond to my having tried to help Harris get elected. So he is worried, very worried. Here are more folks who are worried. Cooper Tebow, a strategist in Silicon Valley, said about a half a dozen major donors had told him they were temporarily pausing political giving out of fear of political retribution. He said he believed the donors would be back into full force by May as anger toward Mr. Trump rose. Yeah, I had a huge maybe to that, but the half a dozen that have stopped because they're afraid of Trump, that's a definite, that's a yes, that already happened. Last thing for now, and then I'm going to tell you a hero, then we're going to talk about the right strategy. But That same guy, Cooper Tebow, continues, we don't know if he's going to go after people. We do not want to be on the top of that list. We're going to hold off and see if he really is or if it's all bluster. But Cooper, brother, when you tell him that, what you're doing is encouraging him to go after some of the top Democratic donors because you just told him it'll make you wet your pants. And then you'll have to put on Depends for the rest of your life, and then you'll run scurrying for the hills. Why don't you just send him a note saying, go ahead and do it, and we'll all run and the Democrats will have no money? Jesus Christ. What cowardice and deep incompetence. How could you not know that? I've got a lot more on this, but Jordan, so far, thoughts on what level of disaster this is?
You know, Cenk, none of the squad, Bernie Sanders, people like Lucas Kunz, people who only supported small dollar individual donors would be in this situation. When you are reliant on big donors to fund your party, to fund your opposition, then you could lose massive chunks of your fundraising just like that, like as we're seeing here. Of course, the establishment Democrats are worried because they're losing giant billionaire donors or corporate donors. Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, but doesn't bother them. I think that on the donation side, all this does to me is illustrate the need to get away from corporate donations or billionaire donors to a people-powered donation strategy. I mean, even in the movement, you're talking about some leaders leaving, interest groups and advocacy organizations struggling, but there are others who are doing just fine because when you build a donation base of individual people giving small dollar donations, they're activated at a time like this. They're upset, they're frustrated with the Democrats, and they can turn to an organization that will actually go out there and fight. So the DCCC, the DSCC, all the alphabet soup of Democratic establishment organizations, sure, they might be hurting, they might be laying people off, but there are others who aren't. So I think we need to clarify who we're talking about here. It's just the establishment Democrats who are in a tough place right now because they don't have strong leadership in Congress and they have relied for years on billionaire donors. Well, they're not your allies. You've talked about it for years. We all know it. Those billionaire donors, those corporate donors are not your allies in the long run. As soon as it's inconvenient for them, they're abandoning ship. But people who are driven by ideals and a commitment to them, they're in the fight for the long haul. So I hope, but I doubt, the Democrats learn a lesson from this.
Yeah, I mean, to Jordan's point, how often did we talk about good cop, bad cop? About how the establishment Democrats are basically part of the uniparty and their donors wanted the same things as the right-wing donors. And now some of those donors, a lot of those donors are saying, yeah, we just wanted goodies. And now it looks like we picked the wrong team and Trump would have given us the goodies. So we're going over to that team. Well, thank you for proving us right for the last 20 years. So what are some of the things that people are afraid of? New York Times explains that as well. And at a November meeting of the Democracy Alliance, a liberal donor network, funders were advised on steps to protect themselves from lawsuits, audits, and investigations. Oh, look at that. They went right to the IRS. Elon Musk did, that's in the news today. And there's the worry about audits and investigations. To limit legal risk, the group is also considering changing its document retention policies to hold digital communications for only a month. Because Elon Musk and the donor class for the right wing are now infiltrating all the data that we have so they can see all of these guys' information. So that's why they're deleting it quicker. Much of the concern centers on legislation in Congress that would remove the tax-exempt status of nonprofit groups that are found to be supporting terrorist organizations. Wait, why is that in here? Israel tried to put this in, saying that if any nonprofit dares to defy Israel, we'll say that they're working with terrorists and end them. And of course, a bunch of corrupt Democrats wanted to go along with that. And of course, all of the corrupt Republicans wanted it. But then they realized, oops, if we do this special exemption for Israel, the Republicans can just call all left-wing groups terrorists and end all of their funding. Oh, look at that, we should make special rules for a foreign government. Golly gee, who could have seen that coming? That one hasn't passed yet, but they're now deeply concerned that it's going to pass. It had already passed the House earlier, even in the earlier Congress, but it had failed in the Senate, but now it might pass both. So buckle up for that. And finally, Pamela Schiffman, who's the president of Democracy Alliance, explained at least they are not running, and thank God for that. Their goal is to intimidate us and wear us down. Our strategy is to step up and step into a fight for democracy. Okay, there you go. So thank you, Pamela Schiffman and Democracy Alliance, for not being cowards like some others. So now, Jordan, I also want to talk about strategies for how to fight, right? So I think there's three different strategies here. One is maximalist, the second is strategic. Yes, I named these. You can agree to disagree on some of them. And number three is don't fight at all. Okay, definitely not that one. And that's the one that almost the entire Democratic establishment apparently is going with right now. Schumer and Jeffries have no idea what to fight on, and they're not telling the donors, they're not telling the groups to fight back. The donors don't want to fight back, and apparently the groups are running. So they're picking the worst possible strategy, which is run like weaklings and go, please attack us. If you do, we'll get even more scared. Okay, the other two are, hey, let's talk it through. Maximalist is fight viciously and try to ruin any legitimacy they have, fight on every single issue, even on losing ground. Now I added even on losing ground because that is the maximalist position. And by the way, this is a position I've done before. I've fought viciously, I've yelled and screamed, and sometimes that works, especially when you're trying to explain to people who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And sometimes it doesn't work. It depends on the situation. Here we lost the majority of the country. We lost the popular vote. Yelling at the voters in specific and calling them Nazis, racist, and names are going to make you lose more voters, more support. I think that's a very bad idea, okay? And I've fought on losing ground before and turned it into winning ground on gay marriage. But we had a sense there that, first of all, it was a constitutional right, it was a core right. And we had a sense that our morality and the fact that we were standing for American principles would work and we would win, and we did. But if you say, all right, I want to fight on losing ground, so that guy who painted Hamas on the statue in Washington, I'm going to go all out to defend him. No, I'm asking you guys to be strategic. So what do you do if you're strategic? You fight 100% on the things you disagree on with the Trump administration. Do not run, okay? Number two, do not fight on positions where they agree with us because you will lose credibility. You will look like a maniac saying, I can't believe they're agreeing with us. I hate them for agreeing. Don't do that, bad idea. Number three, do not lose credibility by giving into hysteria. Oh my God, they're about to take over Vancouver. I love you guys, but they're not. The cannons have not rolled into Vancouver. If you say that, if you keep crying wolf, when the wolf actually comes, no one believes you. And the wolf is here. They're testing the waters right now to defying the courts. If they defy the courts, there is no rule of law left. That's when you cry wolf, because the wolf is actually there. Okay, and finally, build effective coalitions that can help to push back on critical issues. So when Trump said we're going to put boots on the ground in Gaza and we're going to take care of the unexploded bombs instead of the Israelis doing it, you know why he backpedaled from that? Not because the left wing called him fascist, that's Tuesday. He backpedaled from that because MAGA said, what? Boots on the ground? No. Okay, so now they're not at a great position on that yet at all. So there's a lot more pushing to do. But at least we got him to move back a little bit by having a coalition, including his base. Or we could scream at the top of our lungs or run like cowards. I say we be strategic. Okay, Jordan, obviously I framed that, so have at it, Hoss, in any kind of agreement or disagreement.
Well, I mean, you mentioned what I think is really my only disagreement here, and that is even on losing ground, because we've talked about before on some issues, they're long fights. So I wouldn't knock anybody who are committed to these ideals, and I don't think the best description of something like that is someone spray painting Hamas on a statue, but that's neither here nor there. That's a different discussion. I'm with you on strategic. And I think what we saw and learned in the first Trump term was we saw all this energy the first year or two. massive protests, people flying to DC from all over the country for weekend after weekend after weekend of marches and protests. And you saw all of this action, and then people just fizzled out by the time the midterms came. Granted, this came on the heels of Trump and Republicans' attempts to repeal the ACA. So you had an immediate threat, and people ran on healthcare messaging in the midterms, and they took back the House. So that was, I think, one of the reasons. You had this big win, his power is blunted. All of those people just started to tune out for the next 2 years. You didn't see much action. You didn't see as much energy within the movement. I think what groups and organizations have learned is you need to be strategic because you're going to burn out your membership. You're going to burn out all of these people who you're going to need to activate at key moments. And there might be a disagreement in terms of strategy on what is a key moment where we should go all in. And that's okay. I don't think we should frame people who might have a slight disagreement on what is something that we disagree on, or where should we take a stronger stance and go all in on. That's okay. I think if people across the movement are aligned with us 90% of the time, that's fine. If we have a disagreement here or there on what is a position and a hill we need to die on, that's all right. But I'm with you. I think we need to be really smart about how we engage over the next 4 years, because we can't look to Congress for leadership there. We're going to look to the grassroots, and we need people to be in it for the long haul, so we can't burn them out.
Yeah, that goes in both directions, and I totally agree with what you're saying there. Like, stop attacking each other as grifters and immoral, etc. Okay, you have a different strategy. Move on, be a grown up. You do your strategy, we'll do our strategy. And by the way, I hope you win. If your strategy is brilliant and great, and however I frame it, and you don't like the way I frame it, and you want to frame it in a better way, and you want to go do that strategy, and you feel like if you yell at them enough, you're going to win, then do it. So because we need to win. Okay, and stop worrying about what the other guys doing. And same is true for us. Okay, all right. You want to do the yelling strategy, whatever strategy, maximal strategy, have at it, Hoss. Have at it. I'm not questioning your motives. Go ahead. I hope you win. I hope it's a brilliant strategy, and that somehow, in a way that I cannot fathom if my life depended on it, calling other voters Nazis somehow magically gets them to love us and vote for us. We lost the popular vote. We need to regain voters. So the one thing I would hope that everyone can do as a strategy, if you're willing to have strategy, if you haven't already run like the donors and apparently some of the leaders, and if you aren't too busy yelling into the abyss, please attack or criticize their leaders and not their voters. 77 million people voted for Donald Trump. They're not all fascists. They're not all evil. A lot of them agree with us on a lot of things. Show them what we agree on and get them on our side so we can freaking win. I don't think that's complicated, but apparently some think that's super complicated and they can't figure it out. Anyways, it doesn't matter what our disagreement is. Go do a strategy that you think is effective, and for God's sake, get in the fight in a way that you think makes a difference. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.